The story begins in the early hours of a quiet morning as Flight 782 prepared for its routine journey across the Atlantic, a commercial flight like many others, carrying businessmen, families, and travelers returning home. The passengers fastened their seatbelts, the crew checked safety equipment, and in the cockpit two experienced pilots reviewed flight plans. To everyone on board, it seemed like just another safe flight. Yet destiny had written a different script, one that would be retold for years to come. The first strange sign appeared 30 minutes into the journey when Captain Thomas, a veteran with over 2 decades of flying experience, began to feel an unusual tightness in his chest. His co-pilot, a younger officer named James, noticed the beads of sweat forming on his forehead but assumed it was fatigue. The Atlantic stretch was known to be long and draining. No one could have predicted what would happen next. Suddenly, Captain Thomas collapsed forward, his hands sliding from the controls. The alarm bells of the cockpit blared, and James panicked as he tried to stabilize the plane. As the aircraft jolted slightly, the passengers felt the shift. A few nervous glances passed among them, but the cabin crew reassured everyone that turbulence was normal. In reality, chaos was erupting in the cockpit. The co-pilot struggled with both communication and controls, trying to call for medical help and keep the aircraft steady. But then, something no one could explain happened. A woman appeared in the cockpit doorway, calm, composed, her eyes steady as though she had been there all along. She wore a uniform that looked oddly familiar, though slightly outdated. James froze. He recognized her face instantly, though it made no sense. This was Amelia Carter, a brilliant aviator who had been declared dead 5 years ago after vanishing on a test flight over the Pacific. Newspapers had carried her story, obituaries had been printed, and her memorial service had been attended by hundreds. Yet here she stood, alive, in the cockpit of Flight 782, at the very moment disaster was about to strike. James whispered her name, unable to believe it. She simply nodded and stepped forward, sliding into the captain's chair beside him. Without hesitation, she grasped the controls and began stabilizing the plane. The passengers felt the sudden smoothness of the flight, unaware that their lives now rested in the hands of a woman they believed was long gone. Amelia's presence brought a sense of authority, as if she had returned for this very purpose. She guided the co-pilot through emergency procedures, her voice steady, her movements precise. Together they lifted the aircraft back to a safe altitude. For a while, it felt as though nothing could go wrong again. Yet the mystery of her sudden reappearance loomed like a shadow. Amelia's eyes scanned the instruments with a familiarity that should not have been possible after years away. She explained to James how to reroute certain systems, saving power, conserving fuel, and plotting a safer course toward the nearest airport. What astonished James most was how she seemed to know details about this very plane, its maintenance records, its quirks, even the way it responded to turbulence. It was as if she had been studying it long before stepping inside. Meanwhile, in the cabin, whispers began to spread. A flight attendant had seen her enter the cockpit and was stunned into silence. She too had recognized Amelia. Memories of news reports and photographs flashed in her mind. How could a dead woman be flying the plane? The attendant confided in another crew member, and soon the rumor reached the passengers. Fear mingled with awe. Some prayed, others speculated about ghosts, miracles, or government secrets. As the flight continued, Amelia revealed fragments of her story to James. She had not perished in the crash 5 years ago. Instead, she had been taken, rescued by unknown forces she could not fully explain. She spoke cryptically about remote islands, experimental technologies, and a network of individuals who lived beyond official records. She admitted that she had waited for the right moment to return, but never imagined it would be in the cockpit of a failing aircraft. Hours passed, and the flight neared its destination. Ground control was alerted that the captain had collapsed, but they were reassured that the co-pilot had assistance. No one on the ground knew that the assistance came from a woman considered long dead. As the runway lights appeared below, Amelia took full control. Her hands were steady, her focus absolute. The aircraft descended smoothly, touching down with a grace that drew spontaneous applause from the passengers. Relief flooded the cabin, but confusion and disbelief followed. Emergency services rushed to tend to Captain Thomas, who survived the incident but required immediate hospitalization. Reporters swarmed the airport when word spread that something unusual had occurred. Yet by the time authorities reached the cockpit, Amelia was gone. She had disappeared as mysteriously as she had arrived, leaving behind only the testimony of those who had seen her. The co-pilot, the crew, and several passengers insisted that it had been her, the same Amelia Carter whose memorial plaque still stood in her hometown. The world was stunned. News outlets scrambled to cover the bizarre incident, balancing skepticism with eyewitness accounts. Was it a miracle, a cover-up, a ghost, or had Amelia somehow returned from exile, only to vanish again? Governments denied any knowledge, yet files were quietly reopened, and intelligence agencies whispered about aviation projects and missing pilots. Families who had mourned her found themselves caught between grief and hope. Over the next weeks, rumors multiplied. Some claimed to have seen Amelia near remote airfields, others swore she had been taken by secret organizations. Conspiracy theorists built entire stories about her survival, while believers called her an angel sent to save Flight 782. For James, the co-pilot, the memory of that day never faded. He remembered her voice, her confidence, her steady hands on the controls. It was too real to be a dream. He documented every detail, even as skeptics dismissed his account. As months passed, the mystery deepened. No body was ever found from her original disappearance, no wreckage that proved her death. Authorities admitted that evidence had always been thin, but declaring her dead had been the only option at the time. Now, after Flight 782, the story had taken a life of its own. Some argued that Amelia symbolized resilience and survival beyond imagination. Others saw her as a reminder of secrets hidden by powerful forces. For the passengers of that flight, however, she was something more personal. She was the reason they were alive. Parents held their children closer. Business travelers returned to their families, and each one carried a story to tell. That on one terrifying day, a woman who should have been dead saved them all. Whether she was flesh and blood or something beyond comprehension, they knew what they had seen. And so, Amelia Carter's name entered history twice, once as the brilliant aviator who vanished mysteriously, and again as the impossible savior of Flight 782. Her reappearance challenged beliefs, rewrote records, and left behind one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries of aviation. To this day, her fate after that landing remains unknown. But one truth is undeniable. On that extraordinary day, when hope seemed lost and disaster imminent, she returned, not as a ghost of the past, but as the pilot who saved them all. And then please like, share, comment and subscribe to our channel History of States. Thank you.